So this lesson is on getting quadratics in vertex form. So you might want to write this down. This is vertex form. And the reason we do vertex form, it's a pretty easy way to graph your quadratic, because whatever your h is right here, that is your axis of symmetry. So like if I had got a 2, that means right here through x equals 2, that would be my axis of symmetry. And the ordered pair, hk, so whatever h is and k is, that's going to be your vertex. So like if this was 2 and I got -1, that means here at 2, -1, that is my vertex. And then if your a is positive, that means it's going to be concave up. It's going to go like this if it's positive. So this is if a is a positive. And then if a was a negative, it would have gone like this. So if a was a negative, it's concave down. Okay. Also, what you need to know, if it is positive like this, if it goes up, that means this vertex is a minimum, which makes sense because it's at the bottom of your graph. If a is a negative and it looks like this, that means your vertex is a maximum. Okay, and we're going to get into that a little bit more. So let's do a problem. Copy down example 1, and we're going to go through all of this. Okay. All right, hopefully you have it copied, and let's just dive right in. So to get it in vertex form, I'm going to put this first part, oh goodness, in its own little parentheses, and I'm going to tack my plus 71 at the end. Okay. Then I'm going to take my number that's right here. So I got 16. Divide it by 2. So 16 divided by 2 is 8. And then square it. 8 squared is 64. So I'm going to take that 64. So I'm going to leave this the same, plus 16x and I'm going to add that this 64 that I got right here. I'm going to show you why I do that in a second. Okay, on the outside, I still have plus 71. Now, if I added 64 on the inside, remember in an equation, you can't just randomly add things and take things away. So the way I'm going to counteract this, because I added it on the inside, that means on the outside, I'm going to subtract it, right? Because 64 minus 64 is nothing. So it's really like I'm adding nothing to the equation, okay? So if you add it on the inside, you're going to subtract it on the outside. Now, let me show you why we even did all this craziness. This quadratic now has become a perfect square, meaning the square root of 64 is 8. So I can factor this down to x plus 8 squared. Okay? So this middle part factors down to x plus 8 squared. And then on the outside, I have 71 minus 64, which is a positive 7. Okay? So now it's in vertex form. So this is when it says write your equation in vertex form. This is what you would write. The axis of symmetry is your h, which is right here. But this can get a little tricky, so I want to show you. Let me get this copied and pasted. Because if you look at the formula or the equation for vertex form, your h is a negative, okay, or a minus. So to change that minus to a positive, that means it would actually have to be a -8, right? Because minus -8 would change it to a plus. So your axis of symmetry is at -8. Your vertex, remember your axis of symmetry is the first number in your vertex. And then the number here, your k, is your y of your vertex. So does it open up or down? Well, there's no number out front, which means it's really a 1, which is a positive, which means it's going to open up. Remember, if it was a negative, it would open down. And if a graph opens up, that means this vertex is always going to be a minimum. So those two are going to be like paired up. If it opens up, it will be a minimum. It will never be a maximum. And down and maximum, these pair up. So if it ever opens down, it will be a maximum. Okay, let's do another one because I'm sure you're like, I don't know what she just did. Okay, so write this one down. Whoops. Okay, hopefully you have it written down. And I'm going to go ahead and do my separation. This goes in the middle, and my -5 goes on the outside. So remember, we do leave this down to find the number that we're going to add and subtract on the inside and the outside. Oh, whoops, I did not mean to do that. We're going to take 2, my middle number, divide it by 2. Well, actually, it's -2 divided by 2 is -1. And then we're going to square it, and -1 squared is 1. Okay, so I'm going to add a +1 on the inside. I'm going to bring down my -5 on the outside. And remember, you do the opposite. So if I added 1 on the inside, that means I'm going to subtract 1 on the outside. Okay? So let's break down my perfect square. This is going to end up being, to do the perfect square, if your middle sign is a minus, then it's going to be a -1. And put your squared on the outside. And then -5 minus 1 is a -6. So your axis of symmetry is 1, because remember my original equation, this was a minus, so it's going to stay 1. My vertex is going to be 1, and then my number at the end, k, which is -6. Again, there's no number out front, so it's really a 1. That means it's going to open up, and if it opens up, it will always be a minimum. Okay, let's do another one. Okay, now there's nothing at the end, so I'm just going to go ahead and put this in my little parentheses. So, I got my parentheses, I got this. Remember to find the number that we're going to add and subtract. We take whatever my middle number is, so 4 divided by 2 is 2, and then square it. 2 squared is 4. So that means I'm going to add 4 on the inside. And if there's nothing on the outside, I still have to subtract that 4. If I added it on the inside, that means I'm going to subtract it on the outside. So breaking this down, it's going to be an x plus the square root of 4 is 2. I'm going to put my squared up there. Another way you can get this number, if you're like, how is she figuring out what number goes here? It's whatever you get when you divided by 2. So here I got 2 when I divided. Here I got -1 when I divided, which is what it was right there. Here I got 8 when I divided, which is what I got right there. So if you're like, how is she getting that number? That's an easy way. Just whatever you get when you do this dividing by 2, that's the number that's going to go inside there. And then on the outside, I still have my -4. So my axis of symmetry, again, remember, if it's going to change to a +2, that means it was actually a -2. My equation was -2. My vertex is going to be at -2, -4. There's no number out here, so it's really a 1, which is positive, which means it opens up, and it is a minimum. All right, next question. Write this one down, and let's go through it. Actually, why don't we pause it? Why don't y'all try this one on your own and just see exactly where you're going to get stuck. Okay, hopefully you tried it on your own. So I'm going to have this, bring this down. To figure out what I'm going to add, I take my -6, divide it by 2, and get -3. And we square it and get 9. So I'm going to add 9 here. I'm going to bring down my 5 on the outside. And if I added 9 on the inside, that means I'm going to subtract 9 on the outside. So let's break it down into my perfect square. I got an x minus 3. Again, remember, if you're like, what is she doing? This is where I'm getting that from. Negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. And it is squared. Then on the outside I have 5 minus 9, which is a negative 4. So your axis of symmetry is right here at 3. Your vertex is, or sorry, it's at negative 3. My bad. No, it's not. No, it's not. See, I told you, God, it messes me up too. That is my formula, that it's a minus. So my vertex is at 3, negative 4. My number out front is a 1. You're probably like, oh, is it always going to be a 1? It's not. We're going to do some in a minute where it's not 1. It's positive, which means it opens up, and it is a minimum. Okay, so here's one where it's going to be a little different. So look at my very first x squared. Do you see how it's a negative? Well, that's a big no-no. Okay, we're not going to do that. So I'm going to take a negative 1 out. When you take a negative 1 out, all it does is it changes every sign. So my x squared becomes a positive. This minus is going to become a plus, and this plus is going to become a minus. Okay, so taking this negative 1 out just changes every sign. This went to positive, this went to plus, and this changed to a minus. Okay, now it's going to work just like the way we've been doing it. So I'm going to have a negative 1. This first part is going to go in my parentheses, and I'm going to have that minus 6 at the end. So to get the number that I'm going to add or subtract, I'm going to take 4 and divide it by 2, which is 2, and 2 squared is 4. So I'm going to add 4 in here. And okay, so now, woo, your brain's about to explode. You ready? Now, before we said that, remember, if I added it on the inside, I'm going to subtract it on the outside. Well, that still is true, but you got to think about this negative 1 on the outside. So if I redistributed this negative 1, then that would really be a negative 4. And the opposite of a negative 4 is a plus 4. So if you take out a negative 1 in the very beginning, then what you're actually doing, if you add 4 on the inside, you would also add 4 on the outside. And vice versa. If I did minus 4 on the inside, I would also do minus 4 on the outside. So we're going to do more. So if you're like, I don't know what she's talking about, just hang tight, okay, because we're going to do some more. So this turns into an x plus 2 squared. And then negative 6 plus 4 is a negative 2. So my axis of symmetry is at negative 2. Because remember to turn this into, I'm just going to write it. So my axis of symmetry is negative 2. My vertex is at negative 2, negative 2. Now it changes. Look, this is a negative, which means it's going to open down. And if it opens down, that means it will always be a maximum. So let's do another one that had a negative. So I'm going to take a negative 1 out, which is going to change every sign. So this minus will change to a plus, and this minus will also change to a plus. Okay, now let's do what we've been doing. I'm going to take this, oops, and put it in there and put my plus 20 on the outside. Ugh, you know what, guys? I told you wrong on this one. I didn't want to take that negative. I only wanted to take it out of this middle part. So let me try and go back without confusing you too badly. So I only want to take the negative out of this first part. So this is going to stay a plus 6 because I'm not taking it out of the whole thing. So this stayed a plus 6. So this stayed a plus 6. So the only thing it really changes is this number at the end. 6 plus 4 is a positive 10. which means here, oh no, this is actually going to be a positive 10. So let me do this one and go back. So again, I just want to take the negative 1 out of this first part. So this is going to stay a minus 20. And this is going to stay a minus 20. Whew. Okay. So let's keep going. Let's figure out what I'm going to add here. So 10 divided by 2 is 5. 5 squared is 25. So I'm going to add 25 here. I'm going to bring down that minus 20. Now remember, if it's negative 1 and you distribute it, then it'd really be a minus 25, and the opposite of minus 25 is plus 25. So vertex form is going to be negative 1 on the outside, x plus 5 on the inside, and that is squared. And then negative 20 plus 5 is a positive 5. So axis of symmetry is actually at negative 5. My vertex is at negative 5, 5. Because I took out a negative 1, that means it's going to open down, and it's going to be a maximum. Let's do, I think this is one more. Okay. So I'm going to only take the negative 1 out of this first part. So this is going to become a minus 6x. I'm going to leave that minus 9 at the end. To figure out what we are going to add, 6 divided by 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3. 3 squared is 9. So I'm going to add 9 here. And remember, it's really like a negative 9, so the opposite of a negative 9 is a positive 9. So I'm going to have an x minus 3 squared. And then negative 9 plus 9 is 0. So my axis of symmetry is at 3. My vertex is at 3, 0. Because I took that negative out, that means it's going to open down and have a maximum. So if you will go try the worksheet for 4-7 and let me know if you need help.